let's talk through our second lesson in time series data. What I'm going to be focusing on is serial correlation, which is also called autocorrelation. So what is happening when we're talking about autocorrelation is that the error term itself has some persistence. Errors are serially correlated. That means what impacted Y yesterday in terms of other stuff has some persistence over time. It's very common in time series data, and the consequence is very similar to what we saw with heteroscedasticity. It's not going to bias our estimates and our coefficients. It is going to interfere with our ability to capture and to talk about the variance of our coefficients. It's going to make the standard way we estimate variance to be incorrect. And it's going to do so in the least preferred way possible, in that it will make us underestimate the true variance. Variance, as you know, is very dependent on how much information you have. How many observations are you looking at? When our observations are correlated over time periods, the error term is similar. There's some persistence there. It means we don't have as much information as we are saying that we have. So when we're using that dividing by n, we actually don't really have n different pieces of information. And that's how you can conceptualize what's going wrong in our estimation of the variance. We don't have as much information. Now, sometimes we lose track of why it is so important to get the variance right. The variance is what allows us to make inferences, allows us to reject the null or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Having lower variance than is actually the case leads to an increased probability of a type 1 error, of rejecting a null hypothesis when we should not. So our goal and the focus of this lecture is to get a model that gets around these issues in terms of autocorrelation. Again, we're just skimming the surface here, so my main point is to show you that we have these autocorrelation problems with time series data, and that getting around them can be a bit complex. So first I want to discuss testing for serial correlation. How do you know if you have a problem? So the terminology we're going to use here is it's called AR1. The AR is standing for autoregressive process. The 1 means that we are having a 1 period impact. So once we control for yesterday, last week isn't having an impact. It's not having an impact that shows up today. It shows up one time period to the next. The equation that is going to describe this process is this, what's showing up here now. And once again, we're having an error term that has two parts. The first part of our error term, or the second part, the part that we're worried about, is the persistent part. It's part of yesterday's error term that is persisting. So it's the fact that maybe we're trying to look at how government spending impacts the economy, and there is something we're not controlling for potentially. The fact that there was a pandemic shock. That shock happened yesterday, today, or happened last year and this year, depending on how T is defined, persist. That shock is still, that error term is still around. And that's the persistent part of the error term. And that's separate from X and separate from how X impacts Y, and separate from Y as well, except through itself. And then the other component is the random component. So if rho here was 0, we would have no autocorrelation. It would just be contemporaneous, meaning that time period, the own shocks that were happening would be the only thing impacting our variable. So one way to test is we have a null hypothesis. We have a hypothesis that we would like to test whether rho is 0. Do we have an autocorrelation problem? which would imply, without rho being 0 is the problem. If it's 0, there's no persistence, which is what we would like to have in order to make sure we're counting our information correctly. So if we don't have endogeneity problems, so if our x's are completely exogenous and our error term is exogenous from our x's, it's a straightforward test. All we need to do is save our residuals and do a regression on our lagged residuals on the current and do a t-test. So we're not doing labs for this chapter, but I believe that in the lab that is assigned, I have you do something very similar where you do a regression, you save the error terms, and you do a regression where your residuals are function of yesterday's residuals. I'm just going to mention this name, so if it comes up again, maybe it will ring a bell, but another alternative is a Durbin-Watson statistic. It can be calculated automatically. It's not something you'd need to do by hand. And just like other statistics, like our T statistic or F statistic, there are critical values. Your statistical package will guide you, so look at those significance levels rather than just picking a value. Finally, we have just talked here about AR1 processes. I do want to mention more of those, but I do also want to mention that if there's the possibility that your regressors are not strictly exogenous, which is almost always seems to be the case, except if we're doing experiments, then neither the t-test, the very simple t-test which we described, nor the Durbin-Watson test will actually give you the correct results. One of the assumptions that are necessary to do the test are exogeneity. That's true with almost every statistical test, is we need to have that established first before we can look at those test results. But if we don't have that, there are other things that we can do to check to see whether or not we potentially have an autoregressive process. It becomes a little complicated, so I'm just going to throw it out here. We're going to basically take the residual or the lagged residual and regress it using all of the x's. This is basically allowing there to be some sort of correlation with the lag with the x's in other ways that don't imply such strict exogeneity. We also can do this for autoregressive series and processes of higher order, meaning that 2 days ago is affecting today directly, not just through yesterday, by including lags. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Again, we're not going to discuss this further, just to put that in your head for future usage. The one thing I do want to talk about in terms of a way to correct for serial correlation is the following. So here is the most basic regression that we could be running with 1x and using the subscript t for time. So now we were doing a time series. And we are in the same world where we have some sort of autoregression happening where our error term is correlating with our previous error term in the way that we specified before. So consider this. We have today, we have yesterday, and that's the relationship between the x's, the betas, and the error term. Now we're going to multiply this second equation by rho. This is the same rho that showed up before in the autoregressive equation. And we're doing this for a very specific reason. We're doing this to try to purge our equation from serial correlation. So we're going to subtract it from the first. Now this should look somewhat similar to when we did first differencing. The only difference is that rho. Where in first differencing on our model there, we simply subtracted y from yt minus 1 from yt. Here, we are modifying it by multiplying by rho. So on the left-hand side, we have y sub t minus rho times yt minus 1. And we can rearrange that right-hand side as follows. So what we're trying to show here is that we can estimate beta 1 by using these quasi-first differenced x's and y's. Now the reason we might want to do that has to do with this error term. This error term is the first quasi-first differenced error term, and it is exogenous. It is not serial correlated. This quasi-differencing allows us to estimate a model without serial correlation. So it allows us to get the correct standard errors on our beta 1. Now, if you remember from doing first differencing and doing panel data methods, that when you're lowering x in this way and looking at only changes, you're losing a lot of variation. And that is intentional in this case, because that's how we're getting an unbiased estimate and the correct estimate for the variance of our error term. Is we're having a different error term and we are having different x's. Let's talk one more thing about this estimation method. The difficulty in doing this is that we don't know rho. No one hands you a parameter and said this is from on high, the correlation between the error term. The error term, if you remember, is unknowable. So what we need to do in order to execute this method is to get an estimate first of of rho. And we can do that by regressing the residuals on the lagged residuals. What we call this, just so you know the name, in case it calls up, depending on how the first observation is dealt with, it's either called a Cochrane or Cut or Praise-Winston estimation. These are ways to deal with serial correlation by transforming our regression. Both of them are generally done iteratively, where we are updating our estimation of rho and at the same time we are updating our estimation of those error terms. I'm just going to throw out, we're not going to really touch on higher order serial correlation, but this method does allow for that. It is a way that you can estimate consistent standard errors in the face of serial correlation. Statistical packages do this automatically. If we were doing a lab, we would get some practice in creating these estimates by hand to make sure that we're understanding what's going on behind the scenes. Thanks for watching. I hope you're doing well, and I hope to interact with you soon. Take care.